Welcome back to the Wet Pastel channel. I'm artist Avon Waters. This channel is for people who use soft pastels and want to learn how to use different wet mediums in combination with their pastels. We talk about everything from color theory to using different wet mediums to anything that is art and related to soft pastels. Today's episode is about color theory. While I'm not going to use wet techniques in today's demo, I am going to show you something special about color theory that's often misunderstood: monochromatics. I will demonstrate how to mix your own monochromatics and how to apply that as maybe just a base or to block in a similar picture that we did in another episode. If you're liking these videos, please hit the like button. So let's get started. Today I'm going to use black and white with the primary color yellow. We have the color wheel here, and there's two sides to this color wheel. I'm using a yellow that is as close as I can find in my box to this primary yellow here. And what we're going to try to do is use the black and the white to create a tint or a shade. Anytime you add to a primary or a pure color, pure hue color, a white, you get a tint. Anytime that you add a black to the pure hue, you get a shade. Now a tone is different. A tone is where we add a gray to the pure hue. Now this is where it gets tricky, because if you look at these grays, and I'm guessing this darker gray out of my box is going to be the one that will give us the closest to the tone that we can get. But if you look at these grays, and I'll put a still up here, you can see that as you put them side by side, you can see some colors in some of these that are blue and a little bit of green, and I think this one might have even a little bit of red in it. So that's the trouble. Unless you have what they call a neutral gray, and this might be as close to a neutral gray as I've got in this collection, and unless you keep your neutral grays separate, it becomes difficult to create this tone. So we may not be able to create that tone exactly with the grays that I have selected or that you have in your box. Okay. What is the value of using monochromatics? I'll do a demo at the end, and you'll see a larger version of this and how, after I mix these, that we end up with something that can be an underpainting, and you can go from there. So let's start with our purest color here. This is our primary yellow, and as you can see, it's fairly close. It might be a little lighter than this. You're going to have difficulty matching these colors, so don't get too concerned if you're a little off as you mix these colors, because that's the problem with pastel manufacturers, is that they will often mix other colors and hues with these things. Okay, I'm also going to, so we can get a little idea, since there are some skips and jumps that show the paper, I'm going to blend that with my finger a little bit. And now I am going to add white. Now I'm going to add white to this next one, and this will give us the tint. Again, anytime you add white to a pure or somewhat pure color hue, you end up with a tint. A lot of people will call these pale, like a pale yellow, and I'll blend that in also. And you can see that this isn't matching that, but every stick of pure color you pull out of your box, if you do this process, you will still come up with a monochromatic color scheme or color palette that you can use in your underpainting or for the entire painting. Now the next one, we are adding gray and it should be a neutral gray. It doesn't have as much color as maybe that has, but again, you have some difficulty finding those neutral grays. Now I'm not pressing real hard because I want to mix these, and if you've seen a lot of the videos I've done on this channel, we do a lot of color mixing, because despite the fact there are thousands and thousands of colors, you sometimes have to mix the color that you want. And that creates a tone. Any pure hue mixed with a gray, with a neutral gray, is a tone. Now the last one is our black. And we just put black as a very strong pastel. You know how they never say to use black? Well, this is one of those exceptions when you're mixing colors and you're trying to create a shade. So you'll see that I have not colored this in completely, and it will pollute my pastel, but I'm going to put some pastel on there, and I'll probably have to put some black on again. I'll do a little mixing. And you see this one here, I need more yellow, not more black. I told you, the black is a very powerful pastel, so when you're using a light hue like this yellow, you have to do a little bit of adjustments and scumble some of this in here. And creating the shade is a lot more difficult than creating the tint and the tones, because trying to keep a yellow quality to this shade becomes difficult with black because it is so strong. And I'm going to lighten up. Now that I have the yellow, I have the tint, I have the tone, and I have the shade. You can see these two don't have a lot of variation, and on the color wheel this is pretty close to what I have here. It's modulated some because the black is uneven. So I'm going to go back into this and just scumble over, and I'm going to see if I can get, with a clean finger on this glove, and see if I can get a little lighter tone in there. This is an excellent color mixing exercise for anyone to do. It will give you a real good idea how each one of your colors and your pure hues will react to mixing with black, with gray, with white. So let's apply this now to a painting. How to paint with monotones. This is how we mix the colors, and now let's apply it to blocking in a painting. Okay, I used this image in a previous episode, 1 or 2 episodes back, and I demonstrated how to block in and make a stencil that you could do these sort of exercises with color theory without having to sit and redraw. That episode talked about how to turn this color into a black and white value study that is 4 values: white, a middle gray, a darker gray, and then you could use black or a dark black pastel rubbed out, which is kind of a real dark charcoal color. So I am going to put that link down in the bottom so you can see that. So if you want to go back and use that video first, and then you've got the stencil to do these exercises. Also, this is a piece of gray UArt paper. I believe it's UArt, but it's sanded, and I had something on there that I washed off, but because pastels are opaque, it shouldn't interfere with this demonstration. So let's start with the darkest darks. All right, now I know that I don't want, because the camera turns these much darker and increase the contrast of the actual scene, so I know I'm not going to want that dark. But I'm going to start because our darkest dark on our paint chip is the shade. So I'm going to start by putting in the black down here. And again, you'll see that I'm just going to rough in some shapes. Again, this is just one way to start a painting, is just block in the big shapes. And that's what that previous video was all about, was showing you how to block in the big shapes. Then I take the yellow and I'm going to put it over that, and we'll mix some of that together just to get a dark shape. Again, we're just in the blocking in process. So if I was painting this for something more than a demo, I would take a little bit more time and fill in some of those gaps a little bit more, but I think you're getting the idea. And we can come back over this real quick once we start to cover up that gray, so it's easier for you guys to see this process. Now, the sky, there's two options I have here. This grass down here at the bottom is actually a little lighter than the blue sky at the top. And if I want this picture to be about the puffy clouds, then I want to make this tone darker than this tone. If I want this to be about the trees against the sky, then I want to make this tone darker than this tone and lighten up the sky against the clouds. So let's go with the darker tone. And since our darkest tone is this, our next darkest tone is the tone, darkest value is the tone. And so that's what we'll put up for the sky. And remember, the tone is any color, hue, mixed with gray, a neutral gray, which pastels are hard to find those. Again, the neutral grays are difficult to find because of the way that they're manufactured and set in your box, and you have some difficulty that way. And I'll mix in some more of this neutral gray. I'm actually now mixing with the end of, this is a harder pastel than the yellow was. So it's actually, rather than me having to use my fingers, I'm actually able to use this hard pastel to create this blue sky. This is an excellent way, because I'm using yellow. It's like, okay, I'm not using a blue sky. I've decided I'm going to make this monochromatic set of yellows, this landscape in monochromatic yellows. So this is a great way for, if you are stuck in using green grasses, green trees, and blue skies, for you to experiment by dividing any picture that you've got into 4 tonal values and blocking it in. And it will give you a starting point of how to use monochromatics of any color to substitute for the value hues of the greens and blues that you're used to using. You see we've got some highlights here. Well, my brightest color in bright intensity is this tint with the whites. So I'm going to start by putting in just a few of those puffy little clouds with some tints. And again, I would be a little bit more direct in how I'm applying these if I was facing this and working on it for my own painting, as opposed to being a demo here. But we want to just give you an idea of how these colors, these 4 hues and tints and things, can be used to block in a piece and even take it beyond the block in stage. We've got this puffy cloud up in here, and it comes down along here, and there's a little bit right in there. So if I come in here and I put this yellow in here, then this yellow is so intense that it can become part of the cloud structure. And we'll do some blending here. I'm going to grab a piece of pipe insulation in a minute, and we'll show you how this will blend together. But little by little we're building this, and now I'm reserving this down here. If the sun's in the sky, this plane is facing the plane of the grasses, and the pavement is facing the sky. So many times it becomes the most brightest part of a painting in comparison to the wall of trees going vertical where the sun is only hitting the outside edges. Now that I've got this covered, I can go back in here and start adjusting some of these values of this shade and get them a little bit darker. And I'll get the pipe insulation out here now. And that'll help us with our blending. Trees going up the side. I normally put the sky holes in and some of these branches a little later, but we're just blocking in the big shapes. The big shapes are the clouds, the trees, and this little triangular wedge down here. And we've got 4 different values of this yellow by manipulating, and what you can do is you don't have to once you get it blocked in, you don't have to just stick with a 4. You can modulate each of these with some variation in there, and that's the process of starting to add some details. This is just a piece of pipe insulation. You can get about a 6 or 8 foot piece of this for $3 or $4 at a hardware store. It comes in a round tube, and you just tear it off as you need it. But it's a great way to start to blend in some of these. Now you can see how that black and yellow now is starting to lighten up. Before it was just like that photograph, way too dark. And the way you manipulate this, if you watch, you see there's some tree lines in there. We can add that later. We're just after the big shape right now and blocking it in and trying to get a monochromatic base to start to paint other yellows, other shades of gray over this, and we want to keep it in the yellow hue range. Now, because I use that, I'm going to turn it this way and not try to pollute this too much down in here. We want this to be a little higher chroma, in other words, closer to the pure yellow stage. And you see where I put in some of those black areas? I'm getting some variation. These could eventually, taking this to finish, which we're not going to do today, eventually this could be little clumps of grass that have some shade. You can do all sorts of things. You could come in here at the end and pull in some of this yellow and make grasses and things like that with brayers or other tools. But we're not there. This is just blocking in, trying to get the monochromatics in here. Now these are our clouds and our sky coming down to the horizon. And remember that little wedge over in here where we had this mixed in here because the sky intruded into some of these clouds. See, I got into trouble because I used a brayer to demo how you could put those things in there, and now I've got to add a little bit more black up underneath, because where the land meets the edges of the trees, there's always those shaded areas underneath there that are darker underneath trees. So we can pull some of those, and you can see we can start just with adding black over that yellow, kind of shaded gray. We can start to get some modulation of some shrubs and brushes that are down at the bottom. Remember this line of trees right in here? Real easy. We just come back in here. We could use a different yellow out of our box because now we have established a color scheme, it being yellow, non-traditional colors for this landscape. And so now you can easily, now I put that yellow over and you see when I blend it a little bit, this is way too bright compared to what this is. As you can see, this is too bright. By just touching it a little bit, it brings it down in value and makes it appear like it's still kind of little branches of some shrubs or trees in the foreground that are still shaded and not bright sun like these areas up in here. And you could see I could use different grays at this point. This is the same gray I had, and I can come in here and I can move some of that yellow around and create some more sky. I can darken this sky up in here. Remember, I made the decision to have this lighter than this. And at this point, we are starting to enter beyond the blocking end stage. At this point, those of you who have followed my channel know that I would probably stop and start applying wet mediums and destroy this, but keep its shapes and the ghost. But if you're a beginner and you would want to explore monochromatics, then keep going, pick out different colors, remember those grays, like here was a bluish gray. Pick out some of those, go lightly with them. You've got the way the clouds meet with their highlights, and so just go lightly with those. You got to put that white in there. Remember they say don't use white and black. Well, this exercise is how you do use it correctly. Once you put it on there, you then apply the color hue judiciously, not too heavy, but look at that. I can create nice bright highlights in those clouds by sticking that gray down in here. And if you'd like to blend, then you can start to develop these clouds and develop the painting. This is another gray that I selected that has a little bit of blue or green in it, and so I'm not destroying the monochromatic quality of this by adding this. Now if I started putting a lot of it on there, then suddenly this painting would go towards the green side, and we want to keep it in the yellow monochromatics. This is that little wedge of sky that we had in that photograph. So you can just keep developing this as much as you want, and you could start the sky at the horizon is always a little lighter than it is above. You've got higher concentrations of color right overhead, so we can get those in there. And again, I used a little white, so I need to scatter some of this yellow over it, so I keep my monochromatic theme. And then we can blend that sky and in various ways. Like I said, in the description I'll put a whole put the link to the different blending tools and techniques that are available to you pastelists, and each one has a slightly different, once you start using them, each one has a slightly different effect and creates different techniques for you to use in your toolbox. We can do the same thing here with the trees. Remember how some areas of the trees have more darks in them and some areas have more lights in them. By doing that and coming back in here with some of this, the tops and edges of some of these trees catch the light, and we can create a lot of variation before we just go to the dry sticks and put in the highlights to finish this. And using the pipe insulation, you can start to round out some of these places where the limbs and trees go up into the sky. There's a lot you can do before you get down to the finished portion of your painting. All right, I hope that that gives you an idea how to start a painting in monochromatic tones, how to mix monochromatics. Try it with different hues, try it with your violets, try it with your blues, try it with your greens, try it with your oranges, and learn to mix those things because they will give you a lot of versatility in finishing a painting or blocking a painting in like we did this time. So until next time, hit the like button please so others will see this, and we'll have another episode for you soon. Bye-bye.